Cavs are back from All-Star break. Not as eventful as last All-Star break because last one was in Cleveland. I think we won the skills challenge. I think Evan Mobley won the rookie sophomore game or whatever that tournament is that they do there. He won it. He was a star of it. And then, Darius Garland.
He was like crushing threes.
It was the skills challenge was crazy. He was smacking threes. And like with Evan too, like when Evan's on, I think Evan might be a streaky shooter. Because like he has these spurts and they happen so often. I get excited every time he gets one of these spurts, and I'm like, maybe he's just gonna be streaky, right? Like I think that's where my Anthony Davis comp came in, because it was like Anthony Davis could shoot sometimes. And then sometimes he's not shooting well, right? Like he's one of those like Karis LeVert, I get the 45% because I shoot 80 and 20. Like, I think that's probably what Evan's going to be. But we were talking before we started the show today about, there are certain players that aren't going to really bug you right now because they're not going to get exposed in the structure of the regular season. But we will see when the Cavs have these back-to-back games against the same opponents, or when they're playing teams like the 76ers, I thought was a good example of this, because that was a team that felt like they needed to win this game to secure their seeding. And they were going to feel like the same way in the next game when we play them. And they had an interesting game plan where, one, it was a regular season game, and they did game plan. Like it was obvious that they were like, we got to do this and that versus them. And one of the things they did was, hey, we're going to let their forward shoot. Like we're going to let every single guy, 3, 4, and 5 shoot that ball. We will do everything to constrict the top of that key and make sure that Donovan and Darius don't go off. And eventually that did fall apart because the Cavs did almost come back and win that game. I think that gets forgotten, but that was an interesting one where I was watching it and it reminded me, because sometimes you forget, because playoff basketball and regular season basketball are so different that regular season basketball is a completely different game. And that was one where I was like, oh yeah, there might be some players on this roster that drive us crazy in the playoffs.
So that's where I think our inexperience really comes into play. And I keep going back to the play-in game last year and just thinking about like how everyone looked a little bit scared in that moment, except for DG. I will say, like, in both playing games, like, DG in Brooklyn was really, really good. And also in the Hawks game, like, for at least the first half, he was pretty much carrying the offense, and we, kind of fell apart in that game. But in general, he seemed very confident, and I do have the confidence that he will do well in a playoff series. Obviously, Donovan, we know he has tons of experience in the playoffs, so I'm confident in what he's going to be able to do. But then you got guys who don't have that experience, Evan, Jarrett, and Isaac in that starting lineup. And it's just going to be interesting to see if they are able to really step up to the plate, or if they kind of crumble like they did in the first half of that 76ers game, where it was just like playing scared, and it was playing scared against Joel Embiid and those guys that can just dominate like that. So I think DG and Donovan, like I said, pretty confident in general. I think they're going to show up no matter what. But the rest is what will decide if we're able to be a team that's going to go deeper into these playoffs.
It's interesting, right? You mentioned DG and Donovan, and I think there's a similar dynamic between the two of them that I used to feel with Kyrie and Bron, where it was like, I trust both of them in the clutch, but if we got to get a bucket, I am starting to feel like Darius Garland is one of them dudes to just get you a bucket like out of nowhere. And sometimes like Donovan has his spots and he's dominant when he's able to get his spots. And that's kind of the same way in which, and it makes sense because Donovan Mitchell, very much a huge LeBron fan. Like he doesn't lie about that. And LeBron is one of those guys where he has his spots, right? Post up, back to the basket, around that like inner logo. He likes to hit that, turn around. He likes his right wing. Like he has spots that he likes to get to, but he's not necessarily, I'll get to any spot all the time, right? And obviously Donovan Mitchell, not LeBron. Still the same kind of ideal, though, scoring philosophy, where it's like, I got my spots. And I think in a last shot situation, that guy's a little bit easier to defend, even though LeBron's had his moments, obviously, but that guy's a little bit easier to defend than a dude like Darius Garland, who he can just find a spot sometimes. And that's what, like, Kyrie had that ability too, where it's like, Kyrie just got a bucket sometimes. And it would just be like inexplicable how he found the space. And that's the thing with DG, where I'm noticing, like, if he gets a little space, he can cut to the basket and then something's going to happen. And where he's really hit that next level in his development, because he's always been quick, is once he gets that space and they adjust to him, he's either able to make that shot or he's able to make the pass that gets that shot, right? And just when he has the ball in his hands, I feel like, and I don't know, I got to ask other Cavs fans, I guess I will by proxy in doing this video, but I feel a lot more confident if he has the ball in those situations, because I'm like, he's going to make a play, especially in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Versus Donovan, who I'm like, Donovan's going to get to his spots and he's going to get points and he's going to make some clutch shots. He's going to make some clutch threes, but he's going to be much better at doing that when he doesn't have to control the whole flow of the game.
Right.
And that's why I've noticed, and I think that's been a step that, like, that wasn't there for DG at the beginning of the season, but I think that's definitely manifested itself throughout this part of the season. When I'm watching, I'm like, no, actually get DG the ball, JB. Like, let's see what, like, it was one of those things Bill Simmons talks about all the time. The guy he was sitting next to Game 7 at the NBA Finals that was cheering for the Warriors was like, God, I hope they draw something up for LeBron, because I don't want Kyrie to be the one to get the ball here. Right. And that's kind of the thing where it's like, they should draw this up for Donovan Mitchell because he's the best player. Right. But there are moments where I'm like, if I just need a shot though, like I just need somebody to make a shot, DG's really good at just like, you know, he'll get you a shot.
Yeah, I think that's fair, actually. Like, when you think about Donovan, too, I think people think of him as more of the elite scorer because he's had more of those dominant games where he's putting up 40, 50, like crazy numbers. He does those more regularly. So throughout the entirety of a game, like, you probably have more confidence in Donovan as a shooter. But with DG, like, I mean, I keep going back to the playing games. It felt like he was just... everyone was all over him defensively, and he was just making shots somehow. Like, both games, you were just like, I don't know how he's finding a way to get a basket here, but he is doing it. And I think we lost a little bit of that in the transition of Donovan being on the team, but like, Darius is still that guy. And I mean, I'm with you. I feel like in terms of either him taking the shot or facilitating for someone else to get that shot, like get the ball to him, because he's going to make it happen somehow. And yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what JB thinks in those moments of who he trusts, because that's going to be what it comes down to.
And then you know what? JJ Redick has the best comp for this, because he comps, I think, Darius Garland. He comps him to Chris Paul a lot, right? And it doesn't make sense when you first hear it. You're like, Chris Paul, he's Ajax. Because again, it's one of those Evan Mobley, Kevin Garnett things where it's like, he doesn't act like Kevin Garnett. He's not. But then if you watch him play, you're like, oh, okay, I see what he's talking about. And one of the interesting things with Chris Paul is like, outside of when he was in New Orleans, he was never the dude that got the shot, even though you can make the argument that he probably should have been the dude that had the ball in his hands, right? When he was in LA, it was always Blake Griffin. That was a terrible choice for those shots because Blake just didn't have the range for it. And then in Houston, for other reasons, James Harden was just inexplicably bad in those moments. And then now he gets to Phoenix, and it's still like, do you want Devin Booker to take, because he's technically the more capable player. But there's just something about like, when you watch it, when you're playing against a team that has Chris Paul on it and they give the ball to Chris Pall, you're like, all right, like he's going to do something. He's going to make a really annoying jumper or something like that. Like as much as people like to slander Chris Paul recently, no, I know by watching these games where you're playing against Chris Paul, it's like, hey, we about to start an 8-0 run and come back and get this game within 5, and then Chris Paul just smacks off 2 straight jumpers, and you're like, damn, that's it. That's the end of the run. And that's kind of what DG does at times, where it's like, oh, we just need a bucket real quick. I'll just run right past you, get a hook, and then throw this thing up to Evan Mobley, and then he scores. You know, and I think that's a comp that's very interesting, and we have a lot of interesting comps. If we look at this as like all the comps here, what people think that Evan Mobley could be Kevin Garnett. People think Donovan Mitchell is pretty much like Dwayne Wade. And then people think that, well, JJ Redick thinks that Darius Garland is Chris Paul. That's a good team. That's a pretty good team.
I wonder what people have for Jarrett. I feel like people don't make Jarrett comps. Like, I wonder what, I don't know who to place him as.
But there's been so many players that could do what Jarrett does that I don't think he gets a comp.
Unique quality where you're like, I mean, he's a unique person, but like, in terms of his
He's
play. There's not like something you can pigeonhole him into.
Well, and also it's like all the players that you would compare him to play in his era, right? Because
Yeah,
he's a
that's true.
product of the new NBA where it's
Yeah,
like this is how a center plays, where they're pick and roll dominant, roll heavy, ball
right.
screen dunk energy guys. So like he if the best comp for him is like everything you wanted Tristan Thompson to be is him.
Yeah,
Like that's
right,
who he is. It's
right.
like everything you thought Tristan could be is what he was. Everything we thought he was in 2020, well not
Yeah.
2020, way
Or
earlier than that,
20s.
2014,
Yeah.
2015. Like that's who he was or
Yeah.
who he is. So it's like, but you can't compare Jared Allen to Tristan Thompson when Jared Allen's already made a all-star
Right.
team, right? Like, so
Right.
it's kind of like that problem with him where he plays a style that's new and
Yeah.
it's hard to comp him to anybody.
Right.
Um, but even then it's like that if you look at that, it's a really good starting five. Like I think
It is.
everybody's known that. But yeah, Philly had an interest strategy where they're going to make the guys shoot the three, and that kind of brought
Yeah.
me up to this conversation about guys that are going to drive you crazy. I have a fear about a couple players that are going to drive us crazy in the playoffs. You tell me if these are good fears, bad fears, or if you're worried about them,
Okay.
and we'll see where we're at. Isaac Okoro, he's number one on my list where I'm like,
Right.
I like him right now, but I don't know, man. I get
Yeah.
real nervous about that in the playoff series.
Yeah. Well, the other thing with the playoffs that's so different is how teams game plan. Like when
Mhm.
you're going throughout the NBA season, you're having games like every other night. So you don't really have the time to like game plan for a specific team in the way that you do in the playoffs, where leading up to the series, you're like, how are we going to attack this team? Of course, there's some that goes into that in the regular season, but it's more fluid every night where you're just trying to figure it out. When it comes to the playoffs, you're like, who are we going to exploit? Who are we going to make life really hard for that's going to help us win? And I mean, when you look at the starting lineup, Isaac is the one guy that you go to for that. So yeah, no disagreements there. It'll be interesting to see if he can live up to the moment.
And here's why I worry about him the most, because like I know he's gonna struggle shooting some nights. Like
Right.
it would be like me being upset with my cats for jumping on my furniture, forgetting like that's what Isaac does. He's inconsistent as a shooter sometimes. Like that just is what it is.
Right.
But where I think he's gonna drive us crazy is foul trouble. Because that was a problem for him early in the season. And I think it will become a problem for him in the playoffs because they're going to know to not let Isaac defend backcourt players, right? Like he can do that now because they're not game planning for it. But they're going to be like, hey, if we let him like guard Tyrese Maxey, which the Sixers, you notice in that game, refused to let Isaac Okoro stay on Tyrese Maxey. It kept switching him on to like Tobias Harris or somebody like that because they know that's a problem. So we're not going to let him get to Tyrese. We're going to actually make you have to guard the bigger wings. In the playoffs, where the teams you're going to be playing are the best teams in the NBA, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, let's say they play the Knicks in the first round, and then he has success versus Jalen Brunson. That's not out the realm of possibility because they don't really have anything to force you out there. But then let's say you get to the second round. Well, you only have three other teams you could possibly be playing at that point. More than likely, it's going to be the Celtics. It's going to be the 76ers, whether you get the 3 or the 4 seed. And it's going to probably be the Milwaukee Bucks. And you know what all those guys have? Problems at wings. Big players, right? Where now instead of Isaac being able to guard somebody his size like a Tyrese Maxey, what happened? He got pushed on to James Harden, and James Harden had a good game because James Harden knows what to do against a young dude like that and knows how to get that guy into foul trouble and make him a little bit less aggressive. I worry about that there because if he doesn't have what he has defensively on a given night, then the shooting problems are going to become a bigger deal. And then we're playing not Isaac Stevens. Then we're playing Lamar Stevens for 30 minutes in a playoff game.
Yes.
And that's a problem, right?
Yes.
That's where I worry about him there. The other one is Dean Wade because like, I don't know. It feels like everybody in that locker room is like, hey, Dean, you're good. You should shoot the ball more. And he just doesn't want to do it. And I'm like, is that a dude that's going to show up in the playoffs? You know what I mean? And right now, we kind of bet all in on him because we got rid of Kevin Love. He's on the Miami Heat now, which we are going to discuss later too. If he cannot fill that role, even the minimum role that Kevin Love was filling, which is a possibility because, like, Kevin Love is old, but Kevin Love is still like a former 4-time all. Like he's a very
Yeah.
somebody who used to be a very good player. Like the bar is very high for him. If he cannot reach that level on a consistent basis in the playoffs, we're in trouble because now our already depleted bench is even more depleted. And then let's say we're having Dean Wade problems while we're having Isaac Okoro problems, and I haven't even started to talk about the Jetty and Karras factor of this all, right? Which, like, to me, that's where I look at this team in the playoff series, and I'm like, okay, these are issues that they either have to get good stretches in order to make a run, or they got to figure it out during there. But they have definite problems that I could see teams being like, okay, we're going to try to get Karras to dribble the ball a lot, right? Like, we're going to let Karras dribble the ball. We're going to make him feel comfortable here.
Yep.
And that's where I look at that. That's where that 76ers game was a reminder of me. It was like, okay, you know, when they're beating teams by 20 with their backups, like, hey, you don't think there's a single flaw of this team. But then the 76ers come down, you're like, okay, yeah, okay. Yep. Back to reality. There are some issues here. What are things to worry you about this team in the playoff series?
Yeah, I feel like I have some similar fears where like I just don't want to have to go too deep into the bench too much. Like, you know, when you start getting into too many, if you have to have too many like Lamar Stevens minutes. And look, I'm Lamar's biggest fan, but like that's not what you want in a playoff series. And like there's so many things that can happen in any series. You could have Evan or Jarrett get like a little bit injured for a moment. What are you going to do in those moments? Is Dean going to be able to step up because he's probably who's coming in for one of them at that point? Like, is he able to meet those expectations? Like, we just don't have the depth there. If one of those guys is either having an off night or maybe, you know, hurts their finger in a game or something, which kind of makes me think about, I've just been thinking a lot about the playoff roster and who I like really see, if everyone is healthy, who I really see out there getting minutes. Obviously, it's the starting five. Beyond that, like Dean, Ricky, and Karras. And I don't know if you go any deeper than that unless you need to, like based on, you know, whatever's going on, because the depth does make me a little nervous. Like you don't want to have, like, I love Jetty, don't want to have him out there like constantly getting minutes because he could have a really bad night. Like I said, Lamar is another one. I don't want him getting consistent minutes, you know, maybe a couple at the end of a game or something, but we don't need, you know, a ton of minutes for him. So just kind of, worried about what that bench is going to look like.
Yeah, that's the thing with the playoffs is like your bench doesn't matter in terms of like what your bench is in a regular season, but your depth does matter because like being 8 deep is a thing. Like the 2014 2015 Cavs were just, they could do nothing about, people forget, nothing, they could do nothing about that lineup that had Iguodala, Mo Spates, and Sean goddamn Livingston.
Livingston ruined my life.
Could not do anything about it because they just did not have the depth to defend against them, right? And thus, those are the backbreakers, right? When you're on a 6-0 run and you have to rest Donovan or Darius, and then you could go on a 10-3 run with your benching, that breaks a team down, right?
Yeah.
That then gets you to your next period of your starters, and that's how you win sustained periods in basketball games in the playoffs. And, you know, Karras has to be a better version of himself, right? Now, maybe since all the trade stuff is behind him, he gets to become a better version of himself because he's worried about less. Maybe Jetty has to step in and play more minutes. I don't know what the solution is there, but the bench scoring has been a problem since day one, right? Like you really haven't had the bench scoring that we've anticipated having all year. And it's mainly because, you know, those two players have underperformed, and Kevin Love included, but Kevin Love's not here anymore, right? And now Ricky Rubio's back. So, you know, we thought that was going to fix everything. And some days it does, some days it doesn't.
Right. And he has improved since when he first started back. Like, I feel like, and I also just trust him in the playoffs. Like, he's an experienced guy. You don't feel like he's going to crack under the pressure. So I don't have as many concerns about him as I do about the other guys.
And then the playoff experience thing is interesting, right? Because it's one thing to be used to that environment that I think freaks people out. But I think also the biggest hurdle in playoff experience is that you're playing a 7-game series. And the play-in game is like college playoff, right? Where it's like, hey, win or lose, that's what happens, and then
All
maybe,
out.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's just kind of like it's like March Madness with the extra game, and then
Yep.
even that extra game, you're not playing against the same team. This
Yep.
is different, where you're playing against, and then again in the East, if you get to the second round, we're talking about Boston, Philly, and Milwaukee. I can't believe I forgot the one team that won a championship there, right? But you're talking about those three teams who have been in the playoffs forever. Like
Yeah.
those cores have been in the playoffs. What LeBron was in Cleveland when that core started off in Boston. Giannis has been in the playoffs forever, has played in I don't know how many playoff series at this point. Same thing with Joel Embiid and James Harden. Like these are dudes who none of this is new to. And even somebody like Donovan Mitchell, he's played 2-3 playoff series, maybe. You know what I mean? So like the experience factor is going to be something that's going to be interesting to see how they can go overcome, because even like, I don't think JB's coached, been a head coach in a playoff series, right? Like there's a lot of inexperience here. And I think like we talk about like experience in the NFL as coaches, and I don't think that matters as much because like the game's not different in the playoffs like it is in basketball. But for coaches in basketball, like that inexperience is a different thing. For players, that's a different season. Right.
For
like
sure.
it's unlike anything else you do.
Yep. And I think you're right. It's because it's a 7-game series. Like we're in football, it's just one game kind of, you're just going
it's
all
the same
out.
thing you're doing every week, and you're not playing somebody again. You know what I mean? Like it's not
This
even.
is like a different structure that is you're not used to on your day-to-day basis in the league, where you're playing someone different every other night. This is like, how are we going to beat one team 4 times? Like that's not as easy to do. And even like, I know you're talking about the teams that like are at the top of the East. Like I get nervous about the Heat, honestly. Like I don't want to see them in the first round. They have so much experience and they make me really nervous.
They've been to 2 Eastern Conference Finals like within the last 4 years.
I don't want to. And I was talking about this today, and I think I tweeted something about it on who I would most want to see in the first round between the Nets, Knicks, and Heat, because they all give me like issues in different ways. And it is kind of hard to decide, because I think all of those are going to be competitive matchups. I would say the Knicks maybe the most I would want to play. The Heat, I'm like, don't give me the Heat in the first round. I don't want them. And I don't want to play Kevin Love, really.
Yeah, I don't want the Heat. I don't want the Heat. I do want the Knicks, though. Like, I want the Knicks because,
I think the Knicks is the most. The Nets, I feel like, even though, they've blown up and Kyrie and KD are gone now, like, I still feel like they're a scrappy team that could give some people some issues in the playoffs. So I would say definitely the Knicks would be most interested in.
Yeah, I think the Knicks, and then I'll take the Nets second. The Nets are interesting because like they're going to be annoying and scrappy, and like you might get injured trying to play them.
Right.
Like that's why. But like with the Knicks, it's like it's pretty straightforward. I think we just can overwhelm them eventually in a 7-game series. And it's like Donovan Mitchell going to put up 50 in one of those games in the Garden, right? Like we're going to get one of those. Yeah. So,
especially, that'll be so rough for them after not getting him.
Yeah,
that would funny.
That would be so like Trae Young, but like even worse because he's not even leading into it. He's like, no, I love New York. I wish I could play here, but I'm with the Cavs. So bye.
Yep, sorry.
So it's just going to be one of those things. But it's like, I think that those are my concerns with playoff basketball with this team. It's the inexperience, and I think we kind of sleeping on the inexperience. I think overall as a fan base at times where it's like, no, that's a big deal that they don't have that experience.
Right. And like, I want to have expectations for this team. Like they're a good team and we should want them to succeed. But yeah, taking into account their inexperience, I think is important when we're looking at how far we think they can go in the playoffs, because it does matter so much. Like I want to hold them to a high standard, but we have to be realistic.
But also, like, there are times where like the inexperience actually helps you because you just like the not the Falcons, the Hawks that one year they went to the Eastern Conference Finals in like 2021, where like they were just
they've never been back.
they didn't know, they didn't know what they were doing, right?
Like sometimes you don't know what you don't know until it happens, and then you're like, okay, well, I just did it, so I don't know.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, you just try to play. I think the Grizzlies were kind of similar like that. The Mavs too. So like it can happen, definitely, where you make a run there. But there are things where like, okay, yeah, this could be even in those situations, it's not like, those 3 teams have been there forever. Now again, since those seasons have been there forever, like we're kind of joking around with the 76ers. We're like, they always find a way to collapse in the second round because like it's usually what they do.
They do.
And that's just not the case for the other two teams, though.
No.
Like,
Like the pressure is really on for the 76ers too, because I feel like if they do that same exact thing again, people are going to lose it in that fan base, like blow it all up. Like the pressure is a different level for them. Whereas I feel like for us or even a lot of the other teams, it's like, okay, that's a bummer, but we'll move on.
yeah, and it's gotten to the point with Doc Rivers where people are just tired of watching Doc Rivers just blow leads in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, and the Cavs are a team that like I think it demonstrated itself in that game where it's like the Cavs are the kind of team where if I'm the 76ers, I think that's the team you don't want to play in the second round. Because like if I'm looking at this from other teams' perspectives, because the Cavs only know one thing, which is gotta play hard. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they almost do it to a point to where it's like, do they have awareness? Like when Jared Allen is out there doing the yell for the defensive three tech, and like he just has everybody on the broadcast befuddled because they're
it's
like
so clear they don't watch Cavs games when they do that. There's always a couple moments like when you can tell that an announcer like doesn't watch the Cavs at all, and that's one where they're like, "What's going on here?" It's like,
what
oh,
is
no,
he doing
every time?
Yeah, why do it's like it's a thing. It's a thing that they do, and he's very big and loud when he does it.
Yep.
But like that's the kind of like youthfulness where it can be helpful, where it's like, hey, we down 20. Okay,
Yeah.
you know, let's get it to 10, and then they get it to 10, and then they get it to 5, and they just keep playing.
Fast. It happens fast in this league.
And as much as I'm worried about the experience, I think that's also something to where, hey, we could look at this and be like, oh, the fact that these three teams have been there for so long at the top, when they play the Cavs, you know, they're thinking, you know, there might be a game where if like you were playing Boston in the second round and Boston gets up by 15 and they start, you know, doing the vet thing. We've seen LeBron teams do this all. It happened with LeBron against the Pacers, right? They would go up by a big amount. LeBron would be like, all right, hit the cruise button. Right. You know, and then all of a sudden Victor Oladipo got 40. Like, you know, right. And I think the Cavs are the kind of team where it's like, as much as we don't want to play them, I don't think they want to play us because like they know that's one of those things that like if they play the Heat in the second round, they can get past the Heat because they're more experienced. They're just as experienced as the Heat, and they're just better than the Heat, right?
Yes.
But the Cavs are the kind of team where like they're super young.
Yeah.
And they might not be tired in game 6.
The upside is almost higher than the Heat, where like the range of what the Heat can do is in this box. The range of what the Cavs can do is like we could be way worse, but we could also be way, way better than what you would ever expect on any given night.
Yeah, and these dudes are just young. You know what I mean? Like their bodies work. Like still.
Right.
So like
in a 7-game series too, you get tired by the end.
So that's also something that could go in where it's like, hey, you might be sore game 5 and then accidentally drop a game, you know, for no reason there. But yeah, I think that's what we wanted to do in this show is talk about our playoff anxieties about this team as we hope that they continue to play playoff basketball in the city of Cleveland. Ab, anything you want to add before you head out?
The only other thing I was thinking about with DG on like why I trust him so much is that he is like every NBA player's favorite player. Like when other guys are like, "Oh, who do you really like?" and they're like, I just love DG's game." Like people like appreciate. It's kind of what people like. People still do it with Kyrie, but I feel like that was like very common for a while, where everyone's like, just love his game. I feel like that's how a lot of NBA players are with DG. And when I hear that, I'm like, okay, I have so much confidence in what he's going to be able to do for this team. Because if everyone loves him, like, we're good.
You know, you can get a real I think what Darius Miles and Quentin Richardson have a podcast, the Knuckleheads, and like they always ask this question: who's the first player to bust your ass? And it's always interesting to hear the guys that say that because I think JJ Redick was on there and it was like somebody random and he's like, look, it's always the random dude. Or I think Kyrie was on there, was like, who's the first player to bust your ass? He was like Jose Calderon. He got me. And then random. And then because he was like, he got like 30 on me and hit a game winner in front of me and I didn't know that was bad. Like, and then I think JJ asked Darius, and Darius was like, it was what's his name? He used to have the hair that grew over his head. It was not Moutier, but he was a point guard for the New York Knicks. What was his name? I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
But he was just like a point guard for the Knicks. He was like, yeah, I came in, I saw him on the report, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'm about to have a smooth night at Madison Square Garden, and then I ended up getting subbed like 6 minutes into the game. He got 13 points on me, and it's like you can get an appreciation for because like those dudes, like NBA players appreciate different things about guys' games because like it's like LeBron's one of those dudes where it's like, what you gonna do about that, right? I think.
Right.
DeMar DeRozan has one of those famous speeches where he's like, he's LeBron. I don't know what you want me to do.
It is what it is.
He's one of the 3 players in NBA history that can do what he does. Like,
right. You're hoping he doesn't get 50 is like the goal. You're like, maybe just keep it under 50 and we'll be okay with that.
But there are dudes like Kobe where it's like, yo, he does all the stuff athletically that I could do, but he's just so much better at it all the time. Right. And that's like, I think with DG is like, people can see like, okay, well, he's like normal size, like he's not like that much more gifted than him, but it's like he gets to his spot so quickly. He can just like figure these things out. And I think that's what players appreciate. But
it makes me think of last year in the All-Star like draft when LeBron and KD were fighting over DG on who was going to have him. Like KD was like, can I make a trade? Can I get DG on my team? I'm like, oh yeah, these guys just love him, which we're happy to have him here.
Yep. Those are the kind of dudes. But I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to thank Ab for coming on. I think this is episode like 13 or 14. We've done a lot of these. Make sure that you follow Ab on Twitter at Abby_Mueller_. Also, make sure you check out our podcast. It's a girl from Cleveland. She does on Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere where podcasts are available. She is there, dropping the pods there. Also, at SI Digest. She does a Browns SI Digest. Check her out. All her links are in her Twitter bio. So go ahead and run over there, follow her there if you haven't already. But for Ab, I'm Quincy. This is Cavs Attacq, and I'll see you next time.